class in the Sefer HaTanya. We are at present holding in Perek Daled of Sefer HaTanya, in the first few lines, the beginning of the Perek, which is on Daf Ches of the printed Sefer. And today is Tuesday evening, Oyer Li Vov Odor Toshin Ayin Beit. Alright, so we moved in Perek Daled to a further dimension in the Alter Rebbe's description of the Neshama, how it's mislabish in the body, and the powers and the koiches and the characteristics that it has, and how they're to be applied, and how the kavanah of the Eibush is we should use those powers. We saw that in addition to the 10 characteristics, essential characteristics of the soul, we saw in Perek Gimel, we saw there are now a further aspect, albeit an outward aspect to the soul, but a very tremendously significant one, as we'll see, and that's the concept of a lavush. And altogether there are Gimel levushim we saw, and they're called machshava, dibur, u'maisa, thought, speech, and deed. And we went in last year at some length in the concept of a garment and a lavush, what could be the significance of calling these koiches of the neshama, calling them levushim, and why would we use that whole example and the whole concept of a levush? And we saw that the ikka was that the way the neshama is ornamented and built, its 10 powers that we saw in Perek Gimel, it's withdrawn from expression in the world and from affecting and taking part in the physical activities and makeup of the world, according to the point and the desire that David had in those 10 powers that we have. So we need some medium in order to bring us into expression into the world at large. And we saw that that's divided into two sections. First of all, the Adam needs to express himself to himself. So first of all needs to be a expression of the Adam to himself, meaning that he, as a neshama in a guf and as a living entity in the world with a nefesh bahamis as well, with the animal soul that we're going to discuss later on in Perek Vav with more detail, and being in the limitations and the separation of this world from the pure spiritual, then the mensch needs to also discuss, as it will, define to himself what the 10 detached powers of the soul have undergone, whether it be intellectual activity or whether it be emotional activity, as we'll see as we go along. That's through the medium of these levushim. In other words, that they're an outward all-being power, but they're a very significant power that through that the mensch comes in contact with the world around him and expresses himself meaningfully to himself and to the world. And we saw that the mensch is called a Odom here. We saw that Odom is a very significant name, and these levushim, these garments, are fixed in certain bodily instruments in the body, and they're taken on, put on to those instruments, like the power of speech in the mouth, the power of thought in the brain, the power of activity in the limbs of the body. On those garments, the mensch has the ability to control and to decide which garments he's going to put on. Just like in the physical world, you are in charge, and you don't have to put on any garment if you don't want. In other words, that you put on and remove your garments according to your will and your own decision. So in the same way, the mensch puts on these spiritual garments onto his soul according to his decision and his free will, he determines whether it be levushim which come from the Torah, or whether it be levushim that come from maybe sources not so desirable. Or it can be even that he can put on to those parts of his body, levushim, which are just, how do you call it, maybe parav, to use the expression, in a certain way, but nonetheless they're useless and they're not the ultimate purpose of what Hashem really wanted. So, what are the source and what are the actual garments the person puts on according to Kedusha and the Ratzon of Hashem in Torah and mitzvahs? What are the that is Torah and mitzvahs themselves. And we saw that the Torah, particularly the mitzvahs, which are the expression and the outcome of the Torah, well, they are literally a lavush, which is put on, and particularly through the letters of the Torah and the letters contained in the mitzvahs themselves, and all the expression of the halachas and other key aspects of the mitzvahs, well, they literally enclose the soul of the mensch when he makes a decision that he wants to put on the levushim of the Tariag, the 613 commandments, of which one is the study of the Torah. The study of Limud HaTorah is one of the 613 commandments. So, therefore, says the Alter Rebbe, if he is determined to put on the levushim of the Tariag mitzvahs, then what happens with that is that then he is Mekayem. If we go from bottom upwards, we go first of all from simple levush of Maisa, and we go to Dibur and then to Machshava. So we saw that if he keeps carefully, and he keeps according to the demands of the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch, he keeps all the Tariag mitzvahs, the Hilchos Seihem, and their laws and all that's required in action, and he does them faithfully according to what is required, and in speech, he busies himself, and he's continuously preoccupied with talking about the Tariag mitzvah. Well, that can be a very big, what would we call a task in life, to be always talking about, because there's so many aspects of life which are mitzvahs according to the Torah. So what it means is that you talk just about anything in life, but you talk about it the way the Torah would require you to talk about it. So then you're being oisek in the pirush, in the explanation of all the 613 mitzvahs, and once again their laws and their halachas and everything connected with them. You're using this power of speech that's put in your mouth, putting on a lavush from the Torah and the oisias, particularly the letters of the Torah and the Tariag, the expression of the Torah, the 613 commandments, and that will also include, there's a mitzvah of Talmud Torah, B'dibur, there's an Indian to talk about Talmud Torah, our study of the Torah, to speak it out and to converse one with the other about the learning of the Torah. So he takes that particular, those particular letters of the Tariag mitzvahs, how they come into speech, and he busies himself with that. So then he's put on levush of Torah onto his power of speech. And then as a further step, he said, Uba Makshova, and in the power of reasoning, in the oisias and the letters of thought, they are in his brain. Uba Makshova, who masig, he grasps, kol masha efshaloi lahasig, everything that is possible for him to grasp, the Pardes HaTorah. Now, Pardes is a Rosh Hashanah for the four aspects or four gradations of the Torah: Pshat, Remez, Drush, Seid. That's Pardes Shabbat. When he does that, then Hare Klolos Tariag Evrei Nafshoi. The generality of the whole 613 limbs of his soul, Muluboshim B'Tariag Mitzvahs HaTorah, they are enclosed in the garment of the 613 mitzvahs of the Torah. And now he goes on in detail to reckon that out in more specific detail. Uber Protus, Bechinas Chabad Shebenafshay, and we'll soon deal with that in a second. So here we see that the Inyan HaMachshava is when you're masig and you grasp whatever you can and whatever you're able to grasp in these four aspects of the Torah. So we see here that the Torah was given to Yidden in its entirety. So the Torah is divided into these four main aspects, Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Sod. And just by the way, they're connected, the Arba Oilamus, it's well known, the Atzilus, Bria, Yetzirah, Asiya, the Pradesh, for example, Sod, the Alter Rebbe tells us later in Tanya, Sod is in Olam Atzilus, and then there's a difference of opinion as to where Drush and Remez are, whether one of them is in Bria or Yetzirah or the other way around. And in this world, in the practical world, Olam Asiya, that's where Pshat, the simple purest, the simple meaning of every Indian in the Torah, it's called Pshat, but that's Pshat to this particular world. So he said, when you grasp all of that, which means you are required to, and that's one of the ways of putting on the levushim of the Torah in a full way, that you don't just busy yourself in your machshava, just with one aspect of the Torah, but you deal and you devote yourself to all the aspects of the Torah. Then the 613 limbs of your soul are literally dressed up in the 613 mitzvahs of the Torah. And so we said the other day, we discussed briefly, how can you say your soul has limbs? Limbs are shot to a body, not to our soul. So since the soul enters the body, and it enters the body in a way that it becomes mamish one with the body and unites itself very, very ultimately with the body, to the point that you can't really separate between the soul and the body. If you do, then chas v'sholem, you have no longer a mensch. And the union of the soul and the body is a tremendously intimate and interwoven union, to the point that any part of the body and the soul are all one theme. If you talk about the body and you talk about the soul that's inside that part of the body, then it's one unity that you're talking about. If in any way you were to differentiate between them, then you would cause a loss in that limb, which would be affecting maybe a minor loss, but a very significant loss in the whole life of the person, the whole maker. So that means that the soul enters the body. Now, according to the Mishnah in Masechta Ohelis and other parts of the Gemara, there are 613 makeups in our body. 613 limbs and sinews, 365 sinews and 248 limbs. What they are, as you can understand, they are parallel to the mitzvahs aseh and to the mitzvahs lo aseh. So that's the way the body is made up. And certain great poskim have pointed out over the generations how each one of the 613 commands is shy to every part or aspect or makeup or limb of the body and its sinew. They've undertaken that tremendous task to indicate it. So, since the neshama enters the body and forms such an unshakable and united union with the body, then we have to say that the soul also is built in such a way that it's able to enter, or that ability of the soul and that makeup in the spirituality of the soul, which makes it able to enter each of these, as it were, vessels, which are 613 of them in the general makeup of the body, or that is called literally the limbs of the body. Now, of course, it's not limbs in a physical way, but it's a capacity on the part of the neshama to enter that particular makeup of the 613, which is in the body. And therefore we say that the neshama must have then, and must be built, as it were, in a way that it expresses itself and has itself, those 630 powers that exist in the body. Now, not of course in the same way as they exist in the body, in a spiritual way, and that's what the 613 commandments, as they are, the expression of the Torah, or that's what they're all about. The 613 commandments are meant to fit on like a garment, as we said, to those 613 parts of the soul, and through that to express themselves in the limbs of the body as well, so that the whole klolos, the whole generality of those 613 limbs of the soul are completely enclosed in the 613 mitzvahs of the Torah. So what does that mean? It means that the mensch is literally through that union of the 613 commandments with the inner parts of his soul, which unite with the 613 aspects of his body. That means that he becomes, as it were, enclosed in a spiritual lavush, which affects the physical. And so just like it unites with the physical through the part of the aspects of the neshama, which are shayat to that part of the guf, it also unites with the neshama. And so the neshama and the guf are very united below. So those lavushim literally surround and take and enclose the whole person. Mi reishoi ve'ad ad spitz ragloi, from his head right down to the lowest part of his feet. He's completely enclosed in these garments, which are the letters and the oisias of the 613 commandments. So says now the Alter Rebbe, Uber Protus, however, in detail, the Bechina of Chochma Bina Das, what those are the three powers of the soul that we saw in very which are shayat to the brain, Shebenafshei, Luboshes, Bahasogas HaTorah. They are dressed up in the lavush, which he calls here the grasping of the Torah. Shuhu Masid Bapardes. Like we just said, he's got to deal with and understand all four aspects of the Torah, that he's able to grasp Bapardes, Kafi Yecheles Hasagose, according to the ability that he has. Every individual is different. Not everybody can grasp as high or as deep or as in a great circumference like others. But according to his ability and his capacity, and it also got to do with the shoresh of his neshama lamaila. Now, shoresh nafshe lamaila means the stage in Ishtalshos or Ilamas from whence his neshama came directly into the group. We pointed out in Perek Beis that all the neshamas come from a very high level. They're all literally mushash in the Eibishter himself, Kaviochel. But they undergo, as we saw in Perek Beis, in the whole Moshel, they undergo different gradations in the Ishtalshos or the Elamas, and according to divine providence, each neshama, as it were, stops in a certain place in the derivation of the worlds, in the Ishtalshos, and from there he comes directly into the body. And that's called Shoyerish Nafshay Lamaila. But it's not the same by everybody. Some people have a very high neshama, pirush, that they stopped at a high point in the Ishtalshos and then came directly into the body. So their spirituality is on a high level by definition, and therefore their grasp in the Torah is also different. They're able to take things like Sod and Remez and Drush. They're able to take them more. There's some neshamas that they came from a lower level, like many of the neshamas in the generation before Mashiach. They came from a lower level, and therefore they're more able to appreciate the pshat, the simple meaning of the Torah, and the rest of it in Drush and Remez and Sod is something that they just learn in a minor way or in a less intense way. It's difficult for them to appreciate. However, that's all dependent on the shoresh of their neshama l'mayla. However, Torah Chassidus was given to us by the Baal Shem Tov and by the Alter Rebbe, that made it possible even for people who have a low level of neshama, and even for people who are not able, by definition of their neshama in its essence, to appreciate the highest status of the Torah. Nonetheless, the unbelievable greatness of the Baal Shem Tov was that he brought down the inner secrets of the Torah in such a way that he made them available even to people from a lower level in the Ishtalshos or Ilamas, even to the point where it's very difficult for them to appreciate high inyonim, how they are in Torah HaSod, Torah HaKabbalah. They're able to appreciate how those inyonim are in Torah Chassidus, and that makes different their whole Aveda, changes them and relates them to Torah and mitzvahs and to Ali Yidden in a completely different way. And we'll see more about that as we go along with the Tanya. The speed that we're progressing, I don't know how long it's going to take us, but anyway, later on in Tanya, we will get that far. So he said, that's the Indian of your, how do you call it, Chabad, the Chokhmah Bina Das, mentioned over here. Or they go into the Machshava, and they ask for you your understanding in Parashat Torah according to your abilities and according to where you derive from in the Olamas Ha'elyonim, where your neshama came from into the body. So, I don't know if that really interests anybody, but that sentence is very difficult to understand. I mean, apart from the fact that it's difficult to understand, in a simple way it's also difficult to understand, but there's a problem here that the Alter Rebbe says that your Chabad, Shebenafshoi, is mulubish in Hasogas HaTorah, according to what you are masig in the Pshat Remes Drush and Sod of the Torah, and that's the union with the union of Machshava. That would apparently be the way of describing in detail the union with the higher lavush, which is Machshava. So, the word masig and Hasogas HaTorah, Shehu masig, well, that's what we mentioned in Perek Gimel. That was already the koiches of the nefesh. Hasoga is what's called bina. The ability to be masig is the function of the koich of bina. And we said the bina was one of the etzem koiches of Chabad, Chokhmah Bina Das. So it's like as if he's sort of just repeating himself over and saying that the Chabad is mislabish and lavush, which is bina, which is hasoga. That doesn't seem to make sense. He sort of said much of it. So why did he use the expression, hasogas HaTorah? That's kill the lavush of Machshava. And that's to bina. Hasoga, the power of the brain in the etzem power of Chokhmah Bina Das, to be masig, to understand. So anyway, I don't know if it particularly bothers anybody, but that's the question. So what can we suggest as the answer? So it seems to me that we could suggest there are quite a few different routes in it's a well-known kasha, and there are quite a few different answers are given to the kasha. But I think we could say about it like this, and that is that what is different about Machshava as compared to Dibur and Maisa? What is so special about Machshava? The Machshava is what's called the united lavush. Dibur and Maisa are like, how do you call it, separate lavushim. For example, Dibur you don't have to talk the whole time. Halavai you wouldn't. You talk when you need to, and then you keep quiet. You withdraw from Dibur. With Maisa, only when you need to act, then you act. But you're not acting the whole time. And if you do, then you might be a bit hyper or whatever they call it. In other words, those two separate lavushim are not essential to be the whole time functioning. In his brought down Machshava, there's never a moment that you're not thinking. Even when you're asleep. Even when you're asleep, you're thinking. You're always fleeting around in your mind with what's called Machshava. And even if you'll say to a person, no, I'm not thinking right now, then what you're doing is you're thinking about how you're not thinking. Right? You're thinking about how you're not thinking. Which means that you can never really stop thinking. And the Mittler Rebbe brings it in a Maimah, and he's married about this whole Inyan, about the Machshava is an Inyan which, just by definition, if the body is in the soul in the right way, and the mention is everything okay with him, and he's functioning in a normal way, his Machshava is going the whole time. Therefore, you've got to be so careful with your Lavusha Machshava, because since it's going the whole time, you've got to make sure that you know where it is. You've got to be in control and guard over your Machshava. Otherwise, who knows where it's likely to be, because that's for sure, it is working. It doesn't ever take a rest. In other words, that's what we call the united Lavush. Just like your nefesh must always be functioning, if not cholila, you wouldn't be alive. The union of Machshava with nefesh is such that it takes on the characteristic of nefesh itself. Just like nefesh is always alive, Machshava is always alive. Machshava is always functioning. And that's what we call a lavusha mu'chad. It's united in a tremendous union with the Chabad, Chokhmah Bina Das, in the powers of the soul. So much is it united that the Levush is called on the name of the Koyach, and it's not given a separate name. And therefore he calls it Hasoge. He calls the actual Levush of Machshava, he calls it Hasoge. Even though Hasoge is not the Levush. Hasoge is the activity of the power of the soul. It's the he also wants to hear a shir. It's the activity of the power of the soul. The union between the power of the soul called Bina and the Levush of Machshava is so intense. It's such an inseparable union that therefore the Alter Rebbe calls what you are actually mashik in Hasoge, in Machshava, he calls that Hasoge. They're so united and they're so inseparably bound together that one is killed like the other. There's another way we can answer it by saying that in this world, everything that we are mashik, even with our power of Bina, it's like the immediate way these things are is like a lavush balavohi. So, in other words, even when we are being masig, we're really like the emes of that understanding how it is in Elakus Kipshuti or how it is in the higher worlds. It's anyway like a lavush. What we are masig is anyway only a lavush. So in a way, your whole asoga is a lavush. So therefore, it fits together with the concept of machshava very easily. Some people want to suggest that as a way of understanding. However, you use your power of machshava to grasp pshat, remez, drush, and sod in the Torah according to your makeup and to your shoresh neshama lamayla. That's machshava. Now, does the Alter Rebbe? That's got to do with the first three of the main koyos chokhmah bina v'da'at. However, the seven remaining koiches, like we saw, the seven remaining powers of the soul, powers and characteristics of the soul, we saw were emotional traits. The emotional traits. And the more we look at ourselves carefully, and the more we study Chassidus, we see that the mensch lives with his emotional traits much more than he does with any other aspect of his soul. And his whole life is a series of emotional reactions and what they prompt. In other words, if you get emotionally stirred about something, then you will take action or you will react to it in some way. You will speak about it enthusiastically because you've been stirred, and you'll even think about it. You'll take it up into your machshava because you're emotionally aroused and stirred by the matter. So just by the way, this afternoon I was in the Zal, and I noticed that we could do with a bit of that by almost everybody at this particular time. We could do with a bit of emotional, couldn't we? We could do with a bit of emotional arousal in the starting turn, koch and brand, then you talk and then you get things done, and then, that's not the way it's supposed to be. Anyway, says the Alter Rebbe, that once you have midas, then you're alive and you're koching and you're moving, and they relate bi'ikar to dibur. When you become aroused emotionally, then you speak and then you act. They also produce machshava, but that's another realm of the effect they have. The immediate and significant effect of emotional arousal is that it gets you speaking. You become verbose in the matter because you're cocked about it, and you're enthusiastic, you have a love or a fear or whatever it may be for that particular Indian, and it also brings you to Maisa Bapoyo. That's what he says now, the Alter Rebbe. He said, V'hamidas, the emotional traits, Shahin, Yiro, V'ava. They are the two main emotional traits that we saw in Perek Gimel. Fear of Hashem and love of Him, Yiro, V'ava. And you notice he puts Yiro first and then Ava here, because we saw that in the way the development of the actual Aveda of the mensch is the first one he has a certain Yiro below. It's a very interesting idea. And then he gets to Ava. Or that year is also connected with Pachad Hashem Beliboy. So he says, Amida Shahin Yira V'Avo v'anfeihen v'til sehem, and their branches, for example, like Netzach, Heid, Yesod, and Malchus, or Tel Sehem could be, like we suggested, Tiferet, and Yesod could also fit something into that. Anyway, Anfeihem and Tel Sehem was developments of your midas, different ways that the midas give further developments of their own selves, or those midas, or those emotional traits, muluboshes, bekiyim hamitzvahs b'maisa ubedivu. They are beikar enclosed in those aspects of the Tariag mitzvahs, which has got to do with the mitzvahs b'poel, how they have to be done in action. Like I said, that when do you do something? When you're emotionally stirred. That is the main outcome of emotional awakening. So therefore he says, you are midah shahin yira v'yav and fe'an tozan mulubashim. They are enclosed in the keeping of the mitzvahs, in the oisius and that of the Torah, how it tells us what we're going to do in action. Ubedibur, and also in speech. Shehu Talmud Torah shekeneged kulon. As we said before, there's an aspect of the studying of the Torah which comes into speech and must and ultimately express itself in speech. And therefore, he said the year of Hashem and Avos Hashem, they produce a union of speaking. And what is it what do you speak about? You speak about Torah. Yeah, you call it. You are makayim the instruction of the Torah. V'higisa boy yom lailo, that you speak the whole time in matters of Torah, and you got no time to goof around talking Dvorim B'Teilim and all sorts of Nadish Zachen, but you want to talk in things that are connected and in and around the union of Torah. And he said that's the union for Talmud Torah. Shekeneged kulon. What Talmud Torah is, how to call it, like keneged, it's measured up against all the other mitzvahs. And we say this every day in davening, in the brisa, that we say after Birchas HaTorah, Ela dvarim she'ein lahem shiur, apeya v'bikun v'raya, and then we say, Ela dvarim she'odam malchol pereseim b'elam hazeh, v'akeren ke'emes v'elam habo, and it mentions Talmud Torah, and it says Talmud Torah keneged kulam. In other words, Talmud Torah itself is like measured against all of it. Now here we come up with a very interesting little phenomenon that occurs here in the Sefer Tanya. And that is that wherever the Alter Rebbe mentions, in any form that he may mention it, the mitzvah of studying Torah, he always puts in a tremendously encouraging phrase, or almost awesome phrase, which doesn't really have to do with the flow of the simple meaning of the passage he's dealing with. Because one of the things that the Alter Rebbe was behind the whole union of Tanya was to produce the union of learning and studying Torah by everybody, the fullest possible commitment and the fullest possible linkage and devotion to learning Torah. That's one of the aims of the whole union. So therefore, when the Alter Rebbe mentions the word learning or studying Torah, he always puts in a phrase which is not mukrak to the actual text but he always puts it in to stir you and to make you understand how great the study of Torah. Therefore, in Perek Aleph we had an example where he mentioned if you're mavatel Torah and you don't learn Torah, then chas v'sholom kills your soul off. Remember we spoke about it. I don't know if you remember, but we did speak about it in Perek Aleph. Now here he used another expression, quoting that Mishnah. He said that Talmud Torah dibur brings Talmud Torah is the lavush which brings itself on koyach hadibur, and he said that is Talmud Torah, and that is keneged kulam. In other words, stressing once again the greatness of studying Torah. Ki ahavo, the love of Hashem, he shoyrish kol ramak mitzvos asay, umimeno hein nimshochet. He said because the love of Hashem, avo, is the root, literally, and the shoyrish of all the 248 positive commandments. Umimeno hein nimshochet. And from that love of Hashem, they become derived. Bilado, and without love of Hashem, ein lahem kiyum amiti. They don't have correct and proper keeping. You can't keep the mitzvahs properly. Now you can keep them. You can keep them dry, and you can keep them, how they call them, kalt and cold. Or to keep the mitzvahs with a kiyum, amidi, with a genuine kiyum, you have to have love of Hashem. And he said that love of Hashem pushes you and promotes you to do the positive commandments, and then you do them in a way that they have, how they call it, proper keeping. You do it in a way that you're careful about all the details, and you want to make sure it's done properly, and you devote yourself to the mitzvah with a commitment and a brand. That's because you have Avos Hashem. But if you don't have Avos Hashem, you might do the mitzvahs, but it doesn't have proper preservational keeping. So that'll be our moral word for today. In order to keep all the mitzvahs, I say, in the proper way they're really meant to be kept, you've got to have Avos Hashem. So it's not so terrible. It's not as distant as what it sounds. If you just put your mind a bit into the greatness of Hashem, then you feel in Avos Hashem. And later he's going to teach us, the Alter Rebbe, that you've already got Avos Hashem deep inside you. It's deep inside there, the Ava, what he calls the Ava Mesuteres. It's hidden inside it, and all we're going to do is just bring it out.
It's like a diamond.
And that's it. That's the point of studying time.
It's like a diamond in the rough. Diamond in the rough. The old diamonds in the rough.
That's right.
When you first find the diamond, you've got to clear it up.
Yep, that's
it
right.
shines nicely.
All you got to do is just bring it out into Gilui, and then you'll have a koch and a bren in the keeping of the mitzvahs, I say. In other words, nobody will be able to cool you down. Not even a molly. He might cool you down occasionally, but you'll be back there for the war against somebody. You'll be a fighter. Good. Okay, guys.